Welcome to Bespoke Jewelry Workshop. I'm your host, Maxwell the Jeweler, and today we're going to look at what it takes to make a ring from scratch. Just like how any great piece of handmade jewelry starts, let's get our gold ready to melt down. The item that appears to be salt is actually something called borax, and it purifies the metal as I melt it. Now let's get our flame ready and hot enough, around 2000 degrees Fahrenheit, to melt the gold together into one big puck. Here is the 14 karat gold button that's completely amalgamated. I used a bunch of 10 karat gold and added 24 karat gold to bring it up to 14 karat. It's a very precise calculation. Now let's quench it in some cold water. Notice it looks like some flakes fell off it. That was actually the borax. When you heat up borax, it becomes glass-like, but also purifies the metal. Now let's remelt this button in our crucible and get ready to make shot from it. The reason I prefer to make granules of gold is to ensure that the mixture is completely amalgamated and there's no spots of 24 karat or 14 karat within the mix. That'll change the color. Now let's pour out the popcorn kernel sized grains of 14 karat yellow gold and watch it glisten in the sun. Now let's re-add the 14 karat grains to our crucible and get ready to make an ingot out of it. I first preheat the ingot mold so when I pour it in, it doesn't fly up and shoot me in the face. If I didn't preheat this mold, the gold would explode all over the room, and when I first started making jewelry, that actually happened. Now let's unsheath this mold, and all we're left with is a 14 karat yellow gold ingot, perfect for rolling. The next step in this process is taking it over to the rollers. I keep these in a separate building because I like to have enough room when I roll. I start by putting it through on a larger size. Now let's move on to the process of rolling the gold. This process also hardens the metal, as passing it through changes the platelet structure of the gold. This is why you actually have to do something in the middle of stretching called annealing. This annealing process will allow you to stretch it longer and further, and make it so it's more flexible. Now that it's annealed, let's roll it through the roller a couple more times so we can get the length that we need. Now that we have the length that we need, we can send it through the half round roller, and that'll give us the desired shape of the ring. With the shape of the ring in mind, we can now cut the shank to its correct size and get it ready for bending. Now with my way mostly through with the bench saw, I can just snap it where I was cutting. Perfect length for the ring. Now we move over to the ring bending tool. This is one of the most used tools in the Bespoke Jewelry Workshop. We start with a slight curve in the ring. This is to ensure that we don't break the ring, because there's still a chance of that. It's a very thick piece of gold, so it's important to ease your way into the ring bender. Notice how I'm taking my time bending it. I want to make sure that both ends of the shank line up. Now we move on to the repairs of the ring. I noticed that there was a spot of porosity from when I was rolling it, so I decided to add a piece of metal there, just to fill it in. It's important to correct any mistakes that you make at this point, because after this, there's not much turning back. I don't use solder for filling in porosity, rather I like to use the same color gold that I used to make the ring from. This ensures a uniform color throughout. There we go, all filled in. Now we can quench it. Now with the porosity all filled in, we can add a piece of hard solder in between the joint and solder it together. First, let's add a little bit of borax. This is going to allow the solder to flow, as it'll stop the oxidation from forming when I heat up the gold. Now let's add some heat and get that solder to flow. Even heat distribution is incredibly important to make solder flow. Then I noticed another piece of porosity on the other side, so I added a piece of gold, not solder. As well, I laid it flat down on my soldering tray to give a more even heat distribution. This is also going to allow the solder to become one with the ring. This process is incredibly delicate. Using too much heat, you're going to ruin the entire ring. Like I said, you got to start over. Now let's move back over to our bench and clean up that joint. Up to this point, you can still see a line where I soldered the joint together. Let's take a file and grind down the edge where I soldered the ring together. It's important to inspect the ring as you're doing this, because you don't want to take off too much or too little. Now that I grinded the joint, I can start hammering and tapping the ring down to give it a better shape. As well, the inside of the ring has received some abrasions from this work. Let's wrap some sandpaper around the mandrel and then put the ring on it and stroke it against it to make it perfectly smooth. Now we take the ring over to my friend who has a very powerful laser. I laser engraved the inside with my insignia, as well as a 14 karat stamp, and I surprised the client with her name and her husband's name. Similar lasers like this can cost upwards of $80,000. Now let's set the stones. For this project, the client wanted an opal and aquamarine. On the way out, she also mentioned that she wished she had a diamond, so we added that diamond, free of charge. Take a look how much precision it takes to put a little diamond in like this. Here I am burnishing the corners to ensure that it's not going to fall out. Now with that set, we can take it out of our ball vise. We can take a look at our handiwork. Now let's move on to our final polishing. We start by putting the rouge on the polishing wheels. This first wheel is for buffing only. It gets out the scratches and dings. I like to use a mask with a filter because I've heard that polishing rouge can cause certain types of cancers. And I want to feel a little bit like Walter White. I'm extremely happy how this ring came out. But it's not a Maxwell & Co. jewelry exclusive till the client gets to put it on. She was more than elated.
I understand, it's a very special piece.
Like and follow for more jewelry industry secrets.